Scene 79, take one.
My name is Lili Lakich, and I came to downtown Los Angeles in 1980. I grew up in the military. My father was an Army officer, and we spent a lot of time driving across the country from one Army base to another. And I fell in love with neon signs as a kid, traveling in a car. When I graduated from high school in the 60s, I went to Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York, and I didn't really like what they were teaching. And then my father was transferred to Germany. So I went to England to go to film school, decided that I really didn't like working in a group, so I decided to come back to Pratt and get my degree. I spent a lot of time just thinking about what it was that I really, really loved looking at. And I'd always loved looking at neon in the landscape, and I loved drawing. And so when I found out that neon was drawing with light, it was like the universe opened up to me. And I've been working with neon ever since. That was my Volvo that I drove for many years. It was one of the first cars to have a computerized fuel injection system. And when that went, it just couldn't be fixed. And so it sat in front of my house in Mount Washington for 15 years, getting more and more decrepit. And I went out to dinner with my friend Juan, who's an industrial designer, and he said, "Oh, just cut a wedge out of it and wrap it around the corner of a wall." The idea of the piece is that for musicians, there's the expression that in order to get into Carnegie Hall, all you have to do is practice, but practicing won't get an artist into the Museum of Modern Art. So this is my Volvo crashing the Museum of Modern Art, and that's Picasso's painting that's in the Modern. I came from having a studio on Fountain Avenue in Hollywood. Scientology had bought up the entire block where my studio was and raised my rent 400%. When I bought the building in 1980, this neighborhood actually had some art galleries on it and other artists living in the loft spaces. George Rollins had developed his big building with artist lofts in it. It was a very safe and quiet street, actually, at that time. Neon was not accepted in the wider art world. And I would go to events and say, there really just needs to be a museum of neon art, and I think I'm going to start one. And people would say, "No, you can't start your own museum." And so I found a lawyer who set up the nonprofit for the Museum of Neon Art, and we opened it to the public in May of 1982 and started having shows of artists who didn't have another place to show. Neon at the time was experiencing a renaissance. Location managers would come to the museum and decide to use neon in their rock videos or commercials or TV shows. And once that happened, that went out all over the world. And so neon just started becoming more and more popular. We were having parties with live music, huge crowds. We would have 400 people in this building for an opening. In fact, we had so many people that we used to have openings on 2 nights, one for the members and then the second night for the general public. We had the Fibonacci's, which was a great band. Actually, Melissa Etheridge played here in her early days, 1983. One party was a Halloween party where people came dressed up in their costumes, and we had stilt walkers who walked through the crowd, and it was crowded, on top of them, just putting their stilts down through this pile of people. It was just a lot of fun. Artists have always been loners and isolated one from another. It's very difficult to get artists to band together in any kind of a group or movement, but we did band together when the community was threatened by the Community Redevelopment Agency. They wanted to claim this area for eminent domain and give it over to the school district for a warehouse that would have resulted in 300 trucks a day, 24 hours a day, servicing this depot, which now is SciArc. Joel Bloom was key. Everybody looked to him for advice. He attended all the council meetings. He was everywhere and a force. The artists and community really got together to oppose that, and we opposed it big time. And Catellus, which was the largest developer in the state of California, lost. Joel Bloom was a Vietnam vet that owned the store on the corner that sold canned goods, cigars. He was gruff. He was grumpy all the time, but he was a sweetheart under it. He just had this rough exterior. In 2001, I was doing a solo exhibition at Cal State Northridge, and the gallery director, Louise Lewis, wanted me to do an installation. She wanted me to do something that I'd never done before. What I decided to do was a gay bar with neon figures. And so this bar needed some beer signs and cigarette signs and things like that. And I said to Joel, I really want one of those American Spirit neon signs for my installation at Cal State Northridge. And if you call up the company, they'll send you one for free. It's a beautiful sign. And there was no other way I could get one of these because they're not for sale. They're just given to liquor stores and convenience stores and all. And I said, and I'll trade you that for a sign that I make for your window that says Bloom's General Store. So I said, Joel, come on, look, just call up the company. So he did. And they sent him this sign. And so I got it for my bar, and I made him a beautiful neon sign, which hung in the window of his store. We opened the museum in May of 1982, and the museum was here for 12 years. The studio here is my studio. While the museum was here, it kind of got truncated and relegated to some of the smaller rooms. I've been teaching a neon workshop since 1982. I teach 3 times a year. Right now I have 20 students in 2 classes. I teach them in 8 weeks everything about how to design and fabricate neon. In 1992, when the riots happened in Florence and Normandy and Hollywood and South Central and other places, the perception was that they happened in downtown, and so people stopped coming to downtown. And the Museum of Neon Art saw its attendance plummet and couldn't justify keeping the museum open. City Walk was being developed up at Universal, and the developers said, we'll give you a space up at City Walk in exchange for a long-term lease of your sign collection. So the museum accepted this offer and moved up to City Walk for a couple of years. A devil's bargain. It was a terrible fit for the museum. We had to be open 364 days a year, 12 hours a day, and just wasn't workable. And then from City Walk, it moved to Hope and Olympic, and then from Hope and Olympic to 4th and Main, and now the city of Glendale. I'm no longer a part. I was a part of the museum through 1999. When I got here in 1980, and for a long time, parking was plentiful. You could park easily. As soon as all of these restaurants started being built and breweries, none of these businesses were made to provide parking, which I thought was a city mandate. And so they've taken up all the parking, and that's been a big problem. It's increasingly become a destination for dining and drinking beer. This is a 2-block long street, and we're going to have 2 breweries on it. I drink Chardonnay. I don't drink beer. The artists cannot afford to live in the arts district. I'm lucky in that I own the building. Nobody can raise my rent. I keep getting offers on it. People want to buy the building, but I don't have 2 years to relocate. That's what it would take for me to move all of my stuff and find a place. And I just don't have 2 years to devote to that, nor do I want to. Los Angeles has never respected its own artists. The collectors in Los Angeles go to New York to buy art. The museums are controlled by New Yorkers, every single one of them. And they bring in outside curators from New York to create shows about Los Angeles art. People who have never been here. I grew up all over the world. I grew up in Europe. I went to school in New York. I went to school in London. And I think Los Angeles is the most fabulous place I've ever been to or seen. I find it just criminal that New York is considered the be-all and end-all. I consider New York to be very provincial. New York only looks to its own navel and to London or Paris, whereas Los Angeles looks to South America, to Mexico, to Asia, to the Pacific Islands. It looks everywhere else. The multiculturalism that exists here in Los Angeles it's wonderful, and it's inspiring. And so I get particularly upset when LACMA hires a director from New York. The Hammer Museum hires a director from New York. MoCA hires a director from New York. And it's like, where are the LA directors? Why aren't they in charge?
Cut.